Hi, I'm Annabelle. My mom texted me not to come to my own sister's wedding and told me to just watch online. At first, I thought it was cold. Then I found out the venue was on land my father left to me. They used my signature without asking, erased me from the guest list, the photos, the video, like I never existed. I stayed silent, at first. But what do you do when the people who raised you also rewrite you? Do you let them tell your story? Or do you finally write your own? The afternoon light filtered softly through the blinds, casting warm lines across my cluttered art desk. I was mid-brushstroke on a watercolor design, something light and floral, a concept I thought might suit Orlena's wedding invitation, even though no one had asked me to help. The silence in my apartment was the kind I'd grown used to. Peaceful, yes, but lately, it carried a different kind of weight. A soft buzz from my phone interrupted the stillness. I wiped my hands on a towel, picked up the device, expecting maybe a text from my neighbor Diane, who usually sent recipes around this time of day. Instead, I saw a name that made my stomach tense. Mom. No subject line, just one sentence. Don't come to your sister's wedding. Watch online. That was it. I blinked. Once, twice, then again. I stared at the screen like it might change its mind. But the words didn't shift. They sat there, bold and final. Not even a please. Not even a period. I stood frozen, phone still in my hand, mind trying to fill in blanks it had no business attempting to solve, no follow-up message, no reasoning, no warmth, just an instruction, simple and cold. I hit the call button. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. 1,000 possibilities ran through my head. Maybe she sent it to the wrong person. Maybe it was an autocorrect mistake. Maybe, in some absurd twist, she meant to say, "Can't wait to see you at the wedding." But none of that explained why my heart was racing the way it was. I sat back down, staring at the half-finished painting. My brush hung limply in the rinse jar, pigment curling into the water like smoke. Something inside me shifted, slowly, not loudly, but with the certainty of a door clicking shut. That night, I didn't sleep. I laid in bed, replaying our last conversation, pleasant, even affectionate. She'd asked how work was going, if I was still doing that gallery show in Charleston. Not a hint of distance, not a clue that I was being quietly shown the door. The next morning, a package arrived at my doorstep. The return address was my mother's. Inside was a box. I opened it to find the scrapbook I'd spent weeks putting together for her birthday. Hand-sewn binding, glossy family photos, scanned letters from Dad tucked into transparent sleeves. I'd added pressed flowers from the garden she used to tend before arthritis took hold. It hadn't been opened. The cellophane wrap was still intact. The card was still inside. Return to sender. No note. No explanation. I sat down on the floor, holding the book in my lap like a ghost. My fingers ran over the cloth cover. I whispered to the room, "You didn't even open it, did you?" I thought about the time it took to make that, about choosing the photos carefully so she wouldn't cry too hard over the ones with Dad. I remembered hand-painting the edges of the pages. I hadn't rushed it. I'd done it like people do things when they want to prove they're still trying. Maybe that had been the mistake. This wasn't the first time I realized. It wasn't even the 100th. It just happened to be the one I finally noticed. I remembered my 31st birthday, 2 years ago. She didn't call, said she forgot. But Orlena had posted a photo that same day, an old picture of them together at the beach. The caption read, "Just us two, always." At the time, I told myself I was overreacting, that they probably didn't mean anything by it, that old photos just popped up randomly and people posted what they felt in the moment. But patterns have a way of revealing themselves when you stop defending them. I opened Facebook. Mom had posted a status about the wedding prep, flowers from Orlena's favorite florist, venue confirmed, guests flying in from 3 states. There were pictures of the sample menu, a photo of Orlena holding a wine glass mid-laugh, another of Mom in the garden, captioned, "Can't believe my baby is getting married." Nothing about me, not even an old memory. No tag, not even a "Z's bringing the wine." In the comments, neighbors gushed, "Your daughters are stunning." You raised two beautiful girls." Mom's reply was, "Orlena has been everything I ever hoped for." I reread that line 10 times. It wasn't just exclusion, it was precision. I took my tea out to the porch and sat with the breeze. It was warm, but it didn't touch me. I looked out over the hydrangeas she once helped me plant. Their petals were opening, like always, but everything else felt like it was closing. When did it start, I wondered? When did I stop being someone they expected and start being someone they tolerated? The quote came back to me from a book I half finished years ago. The worst kind of loneliness is being ignored by someone whose attention means the world to you. They weren't forgetting me. They were choosing not to remember. My heart wasn't breaking. It was adjusting, making room for clarity where affection used to live. Later that evening, I sat at my desk again, opened my phone. I stared at her name in the contact list. I typed, "Why?" Then deleted it. I typed again, "Okay, I'll stay out of the way." But before I pressed send, I added one more sentence. "This time I won't go quietly." Then I hit send. I wasn't looking for anything when I opened the old album. It had lived under my coffee table for years, gathering more dust than memories at this point. I pulled it out that morning because I needed something to distract me from the silence. Ever since the message, my phone had been quieter than usual. Even Diane hadn't checked in. The hum of the fridge and the occasional groan from the hardwood floors were the only sounds keeping me company. As I flipped through the thick pages, a photo slipped out and landed face up on the rug. I knew the image before I even picked it up. Me, Orlena, and Mom at the county fair. I must have been 9. We were standing in front of the cotton candy stand, cheeks pink from too much sun, grins wide and unguarded. Mom had insisted we pose for at least 10 photos that day, never satisfied until she found the perfect one. Her obsession with perfection had started long before Instagram. Back then, she'd shout across crowds just to reposition our heads into better light. She'd smooth Orlena's hair and instruct me to tilt my chin. I didn't understand why at the time. I just thought moms were supposed to care about things like shadows and symmetry. Now, with everything that's happened, it all feels like foreshadowing. Curious, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through Orlena's latest post. She had uploaded a carousel from her wedding prep. A throwback included that same photo from the county fair. But something was wrong. My face, blurred. Not cropped, not zoomed out. Blurred, like someone had intentionally softened it until I was barely a figure. I froze. My heart didn't leap or sink. It simply paused. The air felt thinner around me as I opened the original from the album and held it next to my phone. Same backdrop, same sunlight. Orlena and Mom were sharp, vibrant, but my face? Smudged like I was never really there. I wanted to believe it was just a filter, an algorithm glitch. Maybe she uploaded a low-res version, but everything else in the image was crystal clear. I scrolled through the comments. "Such a beautiful memory. You and your mom look so alike. This family is picture perfect." No one asked about the third girl. That's when the thought hit me, sharp and unshakable. They're not just cutting me out of the wedding. They're cutting me out of the family history. I tossed the album aside and stood up, pacing the room as realization settled in like dust in sunlight. This wasn't new. I thought back to last Christmas. The holiday card had a photo of Orlena and Mom by the fireplace. They were matching in cream sweaters, holding mugs of cider, a golden retriever photoshopped in for effect. I wasn't in the photo. I hadn't even been sent the card. I only saw it when a friend texted, "Your mom's holiday card is so cute." At the time, I chalked it up to oversight. But now, there was a method to their editing. I remembered overhearing Mom once say, "The fewer people in the shot, the cleaner it looks." That had been about a community fundraiser photo, but now I wondered how often that principle had applied to me. Every family gathering over the last few years, I'd felt more like a guest than a daughter. Orlena's birthday dinners were always just the girls, but somehow, that never included me. Thanksgiving became a revolving door of just close family, which again, didn't include me. And now this wedding, an official event that seemed determined to make my exclusion not just personal, but public. It wasn't a mistake. It was design. I grabbed my laptop and opened Facebook. Mom's latest post read, "Couldn't be more proud of my beautiful daughter and our tight-knit family." The attached photo showed her, Orlena, and Aunt Ruth standing in front of floral arrangements I recognized from the vendor catalog I had once recommended. No mention of me. Not even a passive, "We miss Z." I scrolled back to an older post titled, "The Women Who Shaped My World." Again, Orlena, Mom, and Aunt Ruth. Nothing else. Nothing of me. One comment read, "Your family is perfect." Mom had replied, "Thank you. We've worked hard to keep it that way." That line stuck. Keep it that way. Like I was a stain they'd scrubbed out. A blemish they'd decided didn't suit the image. I walked slowly around my apartment, trailing my fingers along the framed photos that still hung. Me at college graduation, Dad with his arm around me at the lake house, even one of Orlena and me from high school. All untouched, all unedited. I whispered to myself, "You expect your enemies to try to erase you, not your own blood." A quote from Maya Angelou surfaced. "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time." The blurred photo wasn't a one-off, it was a statement. And it was received loud and clear. I sat down, opened Instagram, and uploaded the original childhood photo, the one where I was whole. I captioned it, "Strange how memories get altered depending on who's telling the story." I didn't tag anyone, no mention of Orlena or Mom, just the truth, quiet and direct. Within an hour, the post had more likes than anything I'd uploaded all year. Old classmates DM'd me, "Is everything all right?" That caption hit hard. "You good?" But from the people who mattered most, silence. And somehow, that silence was louder than 1,000 words. Later that night, with my apartment dim and the only sound being the soft hum of the fridge, I opened my notes app. I started a new list. Title, "What They've Taken." I typed the first line. One childhood photo. One piece of proof I was there. Then I hit return. By Wednesday afternoon, I still hadn't touched my phone. It sat in the kitchen on the charger, untouched since I posted that childhood photo on Instagram. The engagement it had gathered surprised me. I didn't expect the messages, the long DMs from people I hadn't spoken to in years, but I hadn't opened them, not yet. Instead, I found myself cleaning, not frantic or compulsive, just aimless enough to feel productive. The drawer in the hallway credenza was the last untouched place in my apartment, a cluttered graveyard of old keys, receipts, and things I'd told myself I'd deal with later. I tugged it open, wiping off a fine layer of dust. Beneath expired insurance cards and brittle hair ties, my hand hit something soft, a small envelope, tucked in the back like it was hiding. I knew the handwriting instantly. Orlena's cursive, neat, controlled. Always looked like it belonged on wedding invitations. I slipped the envelope out, sat on the armrest of the couch, and opened it with the quiet reverence of someone handling an artifact. It was dated 4 years ago. Inside was a letter, handwritten, full page, from a time when Orlena had been broken. She had just gone through a gutting breakup. I remembered how she had shown up at my door unannounced, mascara running, heels in hand, muttering, "I had nowhere else to go." I'd taken her in without question. In the letter, she wrote, "Thank you for being the only person who stayed. You didn't judge, you didn't try to fix me, you just held space. You were my safe place." My breath caught as I reread it. The words were kind, vulnerable, sincere. I read it again, this time slower, letting the praise land like it hadn't been ripped out from under me since. I didn't cry. My eyes stung, but the tears didn't fall. They sat there, heavy, unspent. Back then, when she showed up at my place, I had canceled an important meeting. I made tea. I listened. I didn't ask for details unless she offered them. We watched terrible reality shows until she fell asleep on the couch. The next morning, I woke to the smell of toast and that letter folded neatly on my pillow. For a brief moment, we'd been sisters again. No pretenses, no hierarchies, no mom acting as referee, just two women, stripped down to their rawest forms, helping each other breathe. "I thought that letter was proof I mattered," I whispered now. fingers tracing the ink. Turns out it had an expiration date. I set the letter down and stood up, walking toward the kitchen out of instinct. I poured myself water, even though I wasn't thirsty. My mind drifted toward my last birthday. I had cooked dinner for myself, nothing fancy, just pasta and a slice of boxed cake. I didn't post anything, didn't expect much. Around 10 p.m., I blew out a single candle and went to bed, alone. 3 days later, I saw Orlena's post. Happy birthday to my one and only sister, my twin flame. The photo, just her and Mom, taken at a wine tasting in Charleston. I wasn't mentioned. The comments came fast and bright. You two are gorgeous. Such a bond. Nothing stronger than mother and daughter love. I remember how numb I felt. Not angry, just transparent. That day, I deleted every social media app from my phone and didn't reinstall them for a week. It wasn't the silence that stung. It was the illusion of connection without me in it. People who forget your existence while being praised for loyalty. That's a special kind of cruelty, I murmured, returning to the letter. I held it in both hands, wondering, did Orlena even remember writing it? Or worse, did she remember and not care? I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and started typing a simple message. Hey, I found the letter you wrote me. I've kept it all this time. Then I stared at the screen. What was I hoping for? Acknowledgement? Regret? I backspaced the entire message and closed the lid. I wasn't angry. I was tired. Tired of acting like my pain needed permission to be valid. Tired of playing the part of the sister who always understood. The one who let things go because that's just how Orlena is. I wasn't the villain. I wasn't the martyr. I was just done. I reached for my phone, took a picture of the letter, and saved it in a new folder on my cloud drive. I titled the folder, Reality. I didn't need to post it. Didn't need the world's validation. I just needed to know I wasn't losing my grip on what actually happened. I'm done gaslighting myself for the sake of their narrative, I said aloud, as if the walls needed to hear it too. I walked into the bedroom, sat on the edge of my bed, and opened my notes app. I scrolled to the file I'd started 2 days earlier, what they've taken. Under the first line about the blurred photo, I added a second. A handwritten letter. Once proof of love, now a ghost. I underlined it twice. Then I opened a new folder titled, Receipts They Can't Touch. And in that moment of quiet, I made myself a promise. If they keep rewriting the past, I'll start archiving the truth. It started like any other email. A standard subject line, a familiar sender. I wasn't expecting anything that would gut me before dinner, but there it was, blinking innocently at the top of my inbox. Final guest list approval. I recognized the sender, a vendor Orlena had mentioned during one of her casual brags about securing the best in Savannah. But the email wasn't meant for me. At least not directly. It had been forwarded by mistake, likely the result of typing a similar name into the address bar. My curiosity edged out my hesitation, and I clicked. Attached was an Excel file, nothing extraordinary at first glance. Names, addresses, RSVP status. Then I noticed the column labeled Comments. My name was there, gray, italicized. Next to it, Problem Child, Emotional Risk, Recommend Remote Access Only. The screen blurred, not from the tears, I hadn't blinked yet, but from something inside me breaking apart with sharp precision. I closed the file, reopened it. Read the line again. It didn't change. Other names had cheerful notes. Cousin, flew in from Denver. Childhood bestie. Longtime family friend. Mine was a warning, a liability assessment. It wasn't just cold, it was calculated. I sat there, unmoving. The room didn't spin. Instead, it flattened. The air got heavier, like it was pushing back against my existence. A new, unfamiliar ache rose in my stomach. Not grief, not even betrayal. It was humiliation. That comment wasn't just about the wedding. It was about who I had become to them. Or maybe who I'd always been and just never knew. I stared at the spreadsheet again. The structure was clinical. Exactly the kind of detail-oriented planning Mom prided herself on. Of course she'd be the one adding notes. Of course Orlena would nod along, arms folded across her perfect white blouse, pretending it wasn't cruel, just practical. Had they really discussed me that way? Was I dissected over email like a budget line item? I imagined them sipping coffee, deciding where to place me, not emotionally, but physically. Off-site, on mute, out of frame. I pulled out my phone and sent a single text to Mom. I saw the list. There was no reply. 10 minutes passed, then 20. I called. 5 rings. She picked up. "This is not the time, Annabelle." Her voice was flat, irritated, as if I'd interrupted her manicure. I inhaled slowly. "If you don't want me there, say it to my face." A pause, then a sigh. "You always ruin important things, Annabelle. This isn't new." She said it like a fact, like she was reciting a weather report. "Rain is expected. You're disruptive. The sky is gray. You ruin things." I didn't respond. I ended the call. I didn't cry. Instead, I stared at the wall, where an old family photo hung lopsided in its frame. I walked to the fridge, opened it, then closed it again. Nothing in there could numb the sting of being reduced to a risk. On the door, stuck under a butterfly magnet, was a sticky note, faded ink, my handwriting. "Pick up Orlena from airport." I couldn't remember what year it was from, maybe during her first year in college, the kind of thing I used to do automatically, without prompting, without expecting anything back. I stood there longer than I should have, just staring at it. My head replayed another memory. Thanksgiving, 2 years ago. I had shown up with homemade pecan pie. No one had asked me to bring anything. I thought showing up would be enough. That night, Orlena made a toast. To chosen family. She never looked at me when she said it. Maybe they always preferred me silent. Quiet made it easier to forget I was even there. I walked over to my journal, the one I kept buried under the TV stand, and wrote in block letters. Useful doesn't mean valued. Being tolerated is not the same as being loved. The pen scratched loudly against the paper. Then I underlined it. Twice. My mind flipped through every excuse I had ever made for my mother. For Orlena, I could recite them by heart. She's just tired. She's under stress. She didn't mean it like that. She was raised in a different time. Each one felt like a layer of gauze I had wrapped around a wound that needed air. The email, the note in that column, it was the first time I had seen them stop pretending. Maybe they were finally being honest. Maybe I should be too. I reopened the spreadsheet. This time, I didn't feel shocked. I felt certain. They didn't want me there. They wanted me far enough away that my discomfort wouldn't contaminate their performance. I remembered a line I'd once seen carved into a park bench outside a bookstore in Charleston. "You don't belong where your presence feels like a negotiation." I stood taller, straighter. I wasn't going to fight for scraps anymore. I opened my laptop, clicked into Gmail, and drafted a message to the wedding vendor. Subject: Guest list. Update. Body: Hi there, please remove me from the list entirely. No live stream access needed. Best, Zerelda Whitman. I stared at the screen. My hand hovered over the mouse. For a moment, I hesitated. Not out of fear, but from the decades of programming that told me I was supposed to endure, stay civil, play the bigger person. Then I clicked send, and I whispered, "Let's see how they rewrite the story this time, without me in it." The first sip of coffee barely made it past my lips when my thumb froze mid-scroll. My morning routine, usually a buffer between reality and obligation, was broken by a single image on my screen. There it was, on a Savannah wedding blog I hadn't subscribed to in years. Inside the wedding of the season, Orlena Whitman's vision brought to life. The headline was harmless. The photos? Not so much. There, in high definition, was a dress I'd sketched nearly 6 years ago. I knew that neckline, that subtle lace underlay along the shoulders, the way the train swept left, intentional, designed to photograph best from a wide angle. I knew it because I had drawn it. It had come from my hands, my ink, one night over too much Pinot Grigio and a sketch pad between sisters. But now it was titled A Custom Piece Conceptualized by Her Mother, Gladine, in a moment of mother-daughter inspiration. A jolt ran through me. I stood so quickly my mug rattled against the counter. I hurried to my old notebooks stacked by the bedroom door and thumbed through pages I hadn't touched in years. There it was, sketch number 27. The same silhouette, the same seam curve I'd agonized over for 3 hours. They hadn't just used it. They'd rewritten its origin. My hand trembled as I held my phone over the sketch, comparing the curves, the notches, the annotations in my handwriting. I whispered out loud, I didn't give them permission. They didn't even ask. I sank onto the couch, the phone resting on my knee, the sketchbook still open. My memory drifted to the night that drawing was born. It had been one of our better nights. Orlena was home for a long weekend, single again, laughing for the first time in months. She'd joked, if I ever get married, it'll be on my terms, with sleeves and sass. We passed the sketch pad between us like kids, each adding a flourish. That's the one, she said, tapping my finished sketch. If you ever use it, I teased, credit the artist. She'd laughed. You'll be there, duh, standing right next to me. Now she was standing in it, and I'd been erased from the narrative entirely. A different image flashed through my mind. Less pretty, more recent. 2 weeks ago, a fire at the florist's warehouse had nearly derailed everything. Orlena had panicked. Of course she did. Everything had to be flawless. That night, Gladine had called me, not with warmth, not even courtesy, just function. Do you know any reputable florists that can turn things around fast? Orlena's too emotional to deal with this. Just send me a list. And I had. 2 hours combing through local contacts, cross-referencing availability, putting together a spreadsheet that made their florist look amateur. I never got a thank you. Never even a got it. But there, in the same article, was a paragraph I hadn't expected. When the florist's warehouse caught fire, it was Gladine Whitman's quick thinking and years of planning experience that saved the day. I laughed. Bitterly. It came out like a cough. Of course, I muttered. I really am just the help, aren't I? The knot in my chest tightened. I didn't want spotlight. I didn't crave applause. But theft, stealing both my design and my effort, and dressing it up as maternal ingenuity? That stung. I opened my email, typed Savannah Weddings editorial contact into the search bar, and found the editor's name within seconds. My fingers moved quickly. Subject: Correction request. Body: Hello, the wedding dress featured in your recent piece on Orlena Whitman was originally designed by me, Zerelda Whitman, years ago. Attached is the original sketch with date stamps for reference. I'm not seeking credit or coverage, just truth. Best, ZW. I reread it once, then hit send. My hands were still shaking, but there was a steadiness underneath. Not rage, something colder, firmer. I closed the laptop and picked up my journal. I didn't ask for credit, I wrote. I just didn't expect theft. Then I flipped open the folder I'd started days ago. Receipts they can't touch. A new file, floristfixchatlog.txt. I uploaded screenshots of my messages with Gladine. No flair, no commentary, just facts. I scrolled back through them, each one polite, clinical, like a secretary's notes rather than a daughter's helping hand. No thank you, no acknowledgement, just the silence that comes when someone's already decided you don't belong in their spotlight. They rewrite history because they assume I won't write anything down, I murmured, but I had. And I would. I didn't want revenge. I wanted to reclaim reality. That was my new project. Not fighting, not exposing, just preserving. A plan began to form in my mind, not loud or vengeful, but methodical. If they wanted a pristine memory, let them keep it. But I'd hold the truth. Later that evening, with the sky dimming behind the curtains and a glass of Merlot by my side, I posted a simple story. A photo of the sketch, a close-up of the original page, time-stamped and yellowed at the edges. Caption: Funny how ideas can be borrowed when the original artist isn't invited. No tags, no hashtags, but I knew who would see it. And seconds later, my phone began to buzz. The alert buzzed quietly as I was rinsing my coffee mug. I dried my hands, unlocked my phone, and opened the notification expecting some generic spam. But it wasn't from a brand. It was from my bank. Upcoming large payment scheduled, $25,000. I froze. My balance wasn't even close to that. I opened the banking app, fingers moving faster than my thoughts. The payment was real. It was pending. The vendor? A luxury wedding venue downtown. The same one Orlena had obsessed over for months. I sat down slowly, heart pounding but my face completely still. The transaction listed my name as the payer. My name. My digital signature. They forged it. They forged it, I said out loud, just to hear how ridiculous it sounded. The panic should have hit immediately, but it didn't. Instead, I opened my laptop, created a new document, and titled it loanfraudvenue.pdf. Then I started collecting everything: screenshots, date stamps, transaction logs. They didn't even bother asking. They assumed I wouldn't notice or wouldn't fight. I called the bank, pretending I'd simply forgotten about the payment. I'm double-checking something before I finalize, I told the woman on the phone. She was polite, professional. Yes, we do have a signed authorization. It came through a shared login, linked to this email. My stomach turned when she read off the email. It was the old one, an address Mom and I had shared when managing Dad's estate years ago. They'd used that. They went back to an abandoned alias from another chapter of our lives and repurposed it to steal from me. I asked her to forward a copy of the authorization form, just to be safe. She did. I thanked her and hung up. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I took notes. They used the old me, the trusting me, to steal from the current me, I wrote in my journal. Then I took a deep breath and stared at the ceiling until my pulse slowed. Later that night, something tugged at me to check the group chat. I hadn't said a word in it, not since the early planning stages, but I'd stayed in just to monitor the circus. When I opened the app, the chat was gone. I blinked, gone. I checked again, nothing. I texted one of the bridesmaids, Danielle. Did the group change? 3 dots appeared. Oh, Orlena wanted it to stay tight-knit. Sorry, I'm just following orders. No anger, no emotion, just procedure. Cold, surgical. There wasn't even the courtesy of a heads up. Not even the decency to let me remove myself. Just deleted. Like I'd never been there. Even my silence wasn't safe. They didn't want me involved. But they were fine using my name, my resources, my login, my identity. And now, apparently, my money. I didn't respond to Danielle. I didn't message Orlena. I opened a new document and started building a timeline. The email date, the transaction approval, the shared login access. I added the screenshots. Then I called my friend Naomi, a contract lawyer in Charleston. I've got a hypothetical for you, I said after the usual pleasantries. Let's say someone forged a digital authorization for a bank payment using an old joint access email, and the transaction was for an event I was explicitly uninvited from. What's the penalty? She went quiet for a beat. Annabelle, that's not hypothetical. That's fraud. I figured. What do I do? Save everything. Don't alert them yet. Document every step. If you need help, I'll be here. I thanked her, ended the call, and recorded a voice memo to myself. When people erase you, they forget you can still write your own records. I sat on the porch that evening with a candle burning beside me, not for peace, but for clarity. The air smelled like rain that hadn't yet come. Somewhere across town, Orlena was probably finalizing seating charts, unaware, or maybe fully aware, that she'd stolen from her own sister. Dad once told me, the loudest revenge is living in truth. Back then, I thought it was just one of his sentimental sayings, something poetic to soften a hard world. But tonight, it felt like a command. My mind flashed to the wedding. Orlena smiling, walking down an aisle funded in part by someone she refused to look in the eye. Is it still a celebration if it's built on a lie? I wrote in my journal, they may have borrowed my name, but they can't borrow my voice. After closing the journal, I opened the document I'd been building. Unauthorized financial use. Evidence draft. 1. I reviewed every line. I wasn't ready to act yet, but I knew I would. Let them have their day. Mine is coming too. The invitation didn't come from Mom. It wasn't from Orlena either. It arrived in a casual, forwarded email from my cousin Clara with a short note. Thought you might want to know. They're calling it the intimate dinner. I clicked open the attachment. Pre-wedding dinner. 3 days before the ceremony. Guest list marked as close family and friends only. I wasn't surprised not to be on it. What surprised me was that Clara, despite being wrapped tightly in Orlena's inner circle, had sent it at all. Part of me wanted to delete it and move on. Another part, stronger, more defiant, remembered something Dad once said to me years ago when a neighbor tried to freeze us out over a misunderstanding. Sometimes, you show up just to let them know you still exist. I got up, walked to my closet, and ran my fingers over hangers. I wasn't going to wear red or anything dramatic. No. I settled on a simple black sheath dress, elegant, understated, impossible to fault. Small gold earrings, a neutral lip, my hair pulled back, smooth and clean. Just before I stepped out the door, a message lit up on my phone. Mom, if you come, don't dress too loudly. You know how Orlena hates being upstaged. I stared at the screen for a long beat, then locked it and dropped the phone in my bag. I wasn't coming to steal anyone's spotlight. I was coming to cast my own. The drive to the restaurant was short, but my thoughts stretched the distance. I thought about every time I'd been asked to tone it down. Christmas dinners, fundraisers, even family reunions. It had never been about my clothing. It had always been about presence. I didn't fit into the picture they painted, and I made the frame too tight when I tried. I arrived at the venue right on time. No one greeted me at the door. No host waiting to guide me in. Just a waiter glancing up briefly before handing me a small program. As I scanned the list of names, mine wasn't there. Not even in the back. No and guest. No Z. I slipped the paper into my clutch without saying a word and found an empty seat near the far end of the long banquet table. No one made eye contact, not even the cousins who had once braided my hair at sleepovers. A few minutes into the dinner, the MC tapped a fork against a glass and stood to speak. Tonight is about gratitude, he announced. A thank you to those who helped make this weekend possible. He read through a list of names. People clapped. Toasts were exchanged. And lastly, he added with a smile, a beautiful floral arrangement sent by a mystery fan. What a sweet gesture. I blinked. I had sent that arrangement. I picked the blooms myself, arranged them through a boutique florist that specialized in seasonal pairings. I'd included a card, initials only, discreet, respectful. Now it was being framed as a fan tribute. I looked down the table. Mom was smiling politely. Orlena beamed. Neither of them flinched. No one corrected the speaker. The laughter that followed hit harder than any insult could. I sat perfectly still. I didn't touch my wine. I didn't glance at anyone. They don't need me gone, I thought. They need me invisible. Not absent, just blurred at the edges. They wanted the benefit of my silence, the proof of my inclusion, without the inconvenience of acknowledging me. They want me there just enough to prove they're kind, but not enough to admit I exist. I gripped the wineglass tighter, fighting the heat rising behind my eyes. I was told not to dress too loudly, I thought, but their dismissal screams in every direction. I didn't cry, but the hurt settled like ash on my skin. You can't uninvite me from my own blood, I whispered internally. But you can try to make me regret showing up. I waited for the next toast, for the lull. Then I stood. My chair scraped lightly against the wood. I lifted my glass and cleared my throat. To clarity, I said, voice steady. May it arrive, even if it comes late. Silence, a few claps. Forced, hesitant. I nodded, took one sip of my wine, and set the glass down. Then I turned and walked toward the exit. Clara followed me out into the night air, her heels clicking awkwardly behind me. She began. I turned to face her. Next time, I said softly, send your invite directly. It's cleaner that way. She didn't reply. Back home, I placed the program from the dinner on my desk beside the card I'd sent with the flowers. Then I took a photo. I opened Instagram. Posted the image with a simple caption. Funny how some people only receive kindness when they think it comes from strangers. I didn't wait for the likes. But they came. And so did the comments, flooding in from old family friends, teachers, neighbors who'd known us for years. The cracks were spreading. I wasn't looking for it. That's what made it worse. I had just opened my laptop to answer an email when the image flashed across my feed. A repost from someone I didn't even follow, one of Orlena's guests, probably. The photo was dreamy, almost cinematic, flower arches draped in white, the bride mid-twirl, glowing. But what caught me wasn't the dress or the filter, it was the land. I knew that garden. Every tree, every bend of the gravel path, the exact spot where Dad had built a swing set that stood until the hurricane took it out 10 years ago. It was the lot behind his old office, the one he'd left to me in his will. I'd assumed it had been sold after the legal shuffle. Gladine told me it was too much hassle to maintain, and I, foolishly trusting, let her handle it. But something didn't sit right. I opened the county records site, dug through the online property database. It took all of 10 minutes. My name was still on it. Somewhere between inheritance and convenience, they'd transferred it back to me using a quiet loophole. No calls, no discussion, no courtesy. They didn't sell it. They used it, without asking. My hands didn't shake. My breath didn't hitch. My entire body just stilled. I whispered to no one. They really did it. They really went that far. I refreshed the post. More angles popped up. Videos. Drone footage, sweeping across the venue. My land, their party. The comments were what you'd expect. Absolute fairy tale. Dream wedding. Perfection. I clicked on one of the clips and hit play. It was from the reception. A wide shot of the head table, guests laughing, toasts being made, a slow pan across the smiling faces. Except, something felt off. I remembered that moment. I had been there, briefly, long enough for one polite toast, one glass of wine. I remembered the dress I wore, the exact spot I stood, but I wasn't in the video. Not a frame, not a shadow. I pulled up a copy of an earlier version of that same footage, the one a vendor had accidentally sent to me during a file share test weeks ago. I scrubbed to the same timestamp. There I was, smiling, toasting, clear as day. I played both versions side by side. In one, I was visible. In the other, I had been carefully, surgically cropped out. It wasn't a slip. It was surgery. I wasn't just excluded. I was erased. I closed the video window, leaned back in my chair, and stared at the ceiling. No tears, no storm, just a flame. Quiet, constant. I helped build this family, I said aloud to the empty room. They used my name, my land, my design, and still needed to erase me. This wasn't sadness anymore. This was war. Silent, but deliberate. I pulled open a drawer, found the file I'd labeled Inheritance, Legal Copy PDF, and opened a new Word doc. Header, Public Record, Use of Inherited Property Without Consent. I typed the date, the parcel number, attached photos. I didn't send anything, not yet. Instead, I opened Instagram. Left side, a photo of the original deed, signed by my father. Right side, a screenshot of the wedding reception under the garden lights I had once planted marigolds under. Caption: Sometimes people forget who actually owns the ground they stand on. No tags, no commentary. But I knew what I was doing. And so did they. Within 30 minutes, my inbox lit up. Some were shocked, some were sheepish, some apologetic. I didn't answer any of them. Sometimes, silence is louder than outrage. Later that evening, while I folded laundry and let the hum of the dryer fill the quiet, a message came through from an old neighbor. Why didn't they mention you were the landowner? I would have left early if I knew. Then another, this time from the wedding videographer himself. I was asked to crop the final video for aesthetics. I'm sorry, it didn't feel right. He offered to send the original footage. I replied simply, yes, thank you. That night, I created a new folder on my desktop, Uncut truth. Inside it, I saved everything. The deed, the videos, the correspondence. Let them curate their perfect memory. I'll keep the real one. The next morning, I walked into a law office just off Liberty Street. The receptionist smiled, asked if I had an appointment. I did. While I waited, I checked my phone. Voicemail from Mom. No greeting. Just, "What did you post?" I didn't press play again. I didn't need to. I slipped the phone into my purse and smiled to myself. "I didn't rewrite the story," I whispered. "I just stopped letting you tell it alone." I woke up to quiet, but the kind that didn't soothe. It was the type of stillness that signaled something had shifted, not in my space, but in theirs. My phone buzzed against the nightstand. A message from Clara. "You need to see this." Attached were screenshots, a group text I wasn't part of. At the top, Whitman Wedding, Core. Gladine had written, "Zerelda's behavior this weekend was disruptive and inconsiderate. We're all dealing with the emotional fallout." Below, a reply from someone I hadn't spoken to in years. "She's always had a hard time being happy for others." I didn't respond. I just stared, not because it shocked me, but because it confirmed what I already suspected. They didn't hate what I did. They hated that I did nothing at all. They didn't like that I didn't scream. They just hated that I stood still. I saved the screenshots, dragged them into the receipts they can't touch folder, and stared at the blank ceiling for a long moment. Later that day, an email from my old high school arrived, the kind of monthly update I used to skim. I nearly deleted it out of habit, until the subject line caught my eye. New Scholarship Honors Legacy of the Whitman Family. The body of the email opened with, "Thanks to the generous funding from Gladine and Orlena Whitman, we're proud to announce a new scholarship in honor of the late Richard Whitman, a tribute from the women who carry on his legacy." I stopped breathing for a second. No mention of me, no note that it had been his daughter's idea. The same daughter who sat with him at that very school auditorium 15 years ago, discussing how he'd one day give back. No trace of the late-night planning, the sketches, the budgeting we mapped out on napkins. The foundation had always been built together, but now they'd bulldozed me out of it. They turned it into branding, family unity in brochure form. Even the things we planned together, now repurposed into monuments I wasn't allowed to visit. I closed the laptop slowly and leaned back in my chair. It wasn't rage, it was weight, like everything inside me was suddenly heavier. That afternoon, walking past the corner bookstore, I saw the wedding featured on the magazine rack. Southern Celebrations had given it a glossy 4-page spread. I wasn't in a single photo, not even the wide crowd shots. An older woman stepped out of the shop as I lingered. She looked familiar, someone from the neighborhood maybe. "I saw your sister's beautiful event," she said with a warm smile. "You must be proud." I smiled back. Polite, thin, hollow. There's no way to explain the kind of proud that stings. That night, I poured a glass of wine and sat by the window. The moon hung low, and everything outside looked like it had been dipped in silver. "What do you call a family you outgrew while they were still trying to shrink you?" I whispered. My voice cracked on the last word. Then came the email from my attorney. "We can proceed. Based on the documents, it qualifies as misuse of inherited property. Legally, I had the upper hand. Emotionally, it felt like winning a trophy in a sport I never asked to play. I stared at the screen. I could click reply. I could initiate the case. But I was tired. Tired of proving I existed. Tired of explaining why I mattered. I closed the draft. I didn't delete it. I just whispered, "Move forward, quietly. I'll handle the emotional part elsewhere." That same night, my inbox lit up again, this time with messages from people I hadn't heard from since high school. "I saw your post. I always wondered why you disappeared from all the school fundraisers. Now I know." Another sent a scan of an old yearbook page. A photo of Orlena, me, and Dad, under the caption, "The Whitman Sisters." Beneath that, the message, "You didn't disappear. You were overwritten." I sat with that sentence for a long time, because it was true, and for the first time, I felt the scales shift, not dramatically, not publicly, but subtly, like a door unlocking. Maybe the world was starting to see through Gladine's lens. My phone buzzed again. Orlena. Her name stared back at me on the screen, pulsing like a warning. I let it ring. Then again, finally, a voicemail. Please don't make this worse than it already is. I didn't laugh. I didn't cry. I just whispered, I'm not making it worse. I'm just no longer pretending it's fine. The invitation wasn't an olive branch. It was an obligation. It came from Ruth Connors, one of Dad's old friends, a woman who always floated above the family drama, but still seemed to have her hands in everything. Just brunch, she'd said. Low-key, no speeches, just pastries. Everyone's too tired to pretend right now. I'd almost declined. I drafted 3 separate texts, each more polite than the last. But in the end, I said yes. My therapist had told me, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk in the room knowing you don't owe it anything. So I did. No makeup. Simple blouse, hair back, no armor, no mask, no need. The vineyard was already humming by the time I arrived, mimosas clinking, laughter spilling across the patio. These were the safe guests, the ones who danced but didn't ask questions, the ones who sent their compliments and avoided their convictions. I walked in, nodded to a few familiar faces, and headed toward the drinks table. Ma'am, can you bring these to table 4? I turned. A young waiter held out a tray of mini quiches. I stared at him for a beat. He blinked, awkward. I'm not staff, I said gently. Oh, sorry, he stammered, stepping back, cheeks flushing. I didn't mean… It's okay, I smiled, but inside something cooled. I turned away, and behind me I heard it. Who was that? I think she's with the setup team. I walked to the edge of the patio and stood alone for a moment, overlooking the vines. A butterfly brushed past my shoulder. I closed my eyes. They still don't know how to see me, I thought, and this time, I wasn't even sad, just tired. I stayed near the garden fence until I saw her. Orlena. She walked toward me with the grace of someone about to deliver a prepared speech. I thought we could talk, she said, almost as if nothing had happened. I tilted my head. She gave that same fake calm smile I'd seen her give reporters. You've always had this habit of remembering things so… emotionally. I chuckled softly. You mean accurately? No. She exhaled through her nose. I mean with distortion. You always think we left you out, but you chose distance. I didn't reply immediately. I watched the breeze lift a curl from her hair and drop it back into place. Then I said, Funny, I don't remember writing that florist email for myself. That made her flinch. Barely, but I caught it. Behind us, a few guests had wandered closer. One stepped forward, a woman I barely recognized from school. I saw your post, she said quietly. That was your sketch, wasn't it? I nodded. Another joined. And the scholarship. I remember you and your dad planning that at career day. These weren't confrontations, they were acknowledgments. Orlena tensed. She likes to take credit for a lot, she said, loud enough for the group to hear. I didn't bite. Instead, I opened my phone, scrolled to the image of my sketch, time-stamped, scanned, dated, and placed it face up on the table beside my half-empty glass. I didn't say a word. The people at the table noticed. They leaned, they read. One woman whispered, This whole thing has been twisted, hasn't it? I finally spoke. Calm, even. They spent years building the story they wanted. I just shared what they cut. No drama, no raised voice, just clarity. Orlena muttered something and walked away. I didn't follow. Instead, I finished my coffee. As I walked to my car, the sky over the vineyard turned a soft lavender. I exhaled. Then my phone buzzed. Voicemail. Evren. I played it. We didn't know about the land paperwork. I'm sorry. I played it again. Then I deleted it. Let them apologize to their version of me, I whispered. I'm not that woman anymore. The link came in around 8:12 a.m. I was still in pajamas, hair pulled into a loose knot, hands wrapped around a chipped mug of lukewarm coffee. Your wedding highlight reel is ready, the email said, bright with exclamation points. It wasn't addressed to me, of course, not directly. The videographer must have sent it through a batch list, or maybe someone forgot to remove my address when the edits were finalized. Either way, there it was, waiting, a neat little folder full of curated joy. I hesitated before clicking. I told myself I didn't care, that I had moved past this, but curiosity is its own kind of ache. The video started with drone footage, lavender fields, golden afternoon sun, or Lena spinning in slow motion beneath twinkle lights. I watched, still and quiet, scanning every frame. I wasn't in any of them. Even the group shots, the ones I knew I was in, were sliced just enough to erase me. The table I toasted at, cropped. The photo booth where Clara begged me for one silly picture, replaced with someone else. A time-lapse of guests laughing in a circle I had stood in, tightened just enough to exclude my silhouette. They hadn't just edited me out. They'd edited me away. I let the video run to the end. No tears, no outrage, just a long, steady exhale. They needed me gone so badly, I whispered. They rewrote reality. I closed the laptop and stared into space, letting that settle. I wasn't shocked. I wasn't even angry. I was done. I remembered a fight from years ago, probably middle school. I couldn't recall what sparked it, only the ending. Gladine pointing at me with that strained expression she always wore when she'd had enough. "You're being dramatic, Annabelle." As usual, the label had stuck, the dramatic one, the overreactor, the story twister. Even when I stayed silent, I wore it like a name tag. Watching that video proved something I'd always suspected. It didn't matter how I behaved. I would always be cast as the problem. "If you play a role long enough," I said out loud, "they forget you're a person underneath it." I shut the laptop and stood. I'm done playing their villain. After breakfast, I opened Facebook. Orlena's newest post sat at the top of my feed. "Surrounded by love. A perfect weekend." The photos were lovely, too lovely. White linens, golden light, candid moments polished to perfection. And somehow, every shot managed to frame me out of their truth. I didn't comment, didn't react, didn't rage. I walked to my bookshelf, picked up my camera, and took a photo of my studio, my art desk, my coffee mug, my space. Unstaged. Then I posted it. Caption: "Peace isn't perfect, it's honest." That was it. No subtext, no bait, just me. Then I sat back, opened my journal, and stared at the blank page. There were so many things I could have exposed. The forged transaction, the florist lie, the scholarship erasure, the property use, all of it documented, all of it saved. I still might share it one day, but not now, because power isn't always about detonating what you've buried. Sometimes it's about keeping it in your pocket, letting others wonder what you know and what you're capable of. "Silence isn't surrender," I wrote. "Sometimes it's a ceasefire." I remembered something my therapist had said a month ago. When you stop needing to be understood, you become free. I hadn't understood that at the time. But now, I wrote underneath it, "I'm no longer waiting to be seen. I'm showing up for myself." The words felt permanent. Later that afternoon, I sat at my desk and opened a new email draft. To Gladine. Subject: regarding recent events. I didn't write with venom, just facts. I outlined the misuses of my name, the unauthorized land access, the deliberate removal of my image and contributions. I ended it simply. This is not an invitation for conversation, it's closure. I stared at the screen for a long while, then I clicked Save Draft. Not sending it yet felt like a choice, like I had the power now. "I'm not the daughter you get to define anymore," I whispered. Evening came slowly. I poured a glass of wine and stepped onto the porch, barefoot on the wood planks, watching the world wind down. Then I checked the mailbox. Among the bills and junk, one card stood out. No return address. I opened it carefully. Inside was a photo, grainy, decades old. Dad and me, sitting on the front porch, legs swinging, faces close together. On the back, a yellow post-it note in handwriting I didn't recognize. He'd be proud of how you handled this. No signature, just that. I stared at it for a long while, hands still, heart steady. Then I smiled and whispered, maybe that's all the validation I ever needed. The podcast began with piano music and a deep, steady voice. Behind the wedding, when family isn't family, the host said. Today, we're diving into a Savannah wedding that may have looked perfect, but the truth behind the photos tells another story. I sat on the windowsill of my studio, legs pulled under me, the late afternoon sun stretching across the wood floor. I didn't flinch. I didn't feel exposed. I smiled. The episode quoted an anonymous source and referenced documented misuse of assets. I knew every word. I'd sent them. Evidence of the bank fraud, the forged loan, the wedding venue on my inherited land, the edited footage, the silent smears. No poetry, no riddles, just the truth, with timestamps. They wanted a story, I thought. Now they get one, unfiltered. And that wasn't all. The article dropped the same day. A long-form piece, beautifully written by an investigative blogger I'd reached out to quietly. She had listened, without bias, without hunger for scandal. She just wanted to know what had happened. The title stopped people cold. The Wedding on Stolen Ground, a daughter's story. The body included a full timeline, screenshots of documents, side-by-side images, the original sketch, property deeds, emails, the cropped video and the original one. No names were named, but no one reading it could mistake who the story was about. The internet filled in the blanks. The comments came quickly. This is what generational gaslighting looks like. Heartbreaking and empowering. You're not alone. I was written out too. No more wondering if my voice mattered. It did. That week, I received no direct calls. Just silence. The kind that hums. I heard through a friend that Gladine's social media had gone private. Orlena's wedding sponsors started quietly distancing themselves. A fashion collaboration disappeared from her feed. Her engagement stats plummeted. When the image cracks, I wrote in my journal, everything else starts leaking. A week after the article went live, a letter arrived at my apartment. Official, thick paper, legal firm logo. It was from Orlena's lawyer, polite, sterile. They suggested a private resolution, a mutual narrative closure, and expressed hope that the family could avoid further damage. I folded the letter in half and laid it on the counter. Then I opened my laptop and typed a one-line reply. The narrative is no longer mutual. No threats, no counteroffer. I wasn't interested in discussions. I forwarded the land case paperwork to my attorney with the subject. Proceed. Let the courts write the final footnote. That night, I scrolled through my inbox. Something had changed. Dozens of emails from women I didn't know, daughters, sisters, ex-wives. They told me their stories. My mother blamed me for everything until I stopped apologizing. My sister cut me out of our father's funeral photos. My husband said I remembered things wrong. I believed him for 10 years. One message ended simply. Because of you, I wrote my first boundary. I whispered, because of me, I became someone new. I turned my chair toward the canvas leaning against the wall. On it, I'd begun to paint something abstract, tangled lines, rough shapes, layers of shadow and light. I framed my original wedding sketch, the one I'd drawn for Orlena years ago, and hung it above the studio desk. That design was mine, not theirs, and it would no longer belong to a story that erased me. The next morning, I passed the downtown bookstore on my way to get tea. In the window was the same bridal magazine cover I'd seen 100 times, Orlena glowing in her dress, surrounded by curated perfection. But beside it sat another magazine. Smaller. Bold. Art from the Ashes, stories of women who took back their lives. I stepped inside, picked it up, and flipped to page 14. There I was, not smiling, not posing, just sitting in my studio, surrounded by truth. I held the magazine in my hands and whispered, they tried to erase me from their story, so I wrote a better one.